past and how awesome she is. And I was really going to start that. I only just met her just moments ago. And so one of my regrets in life is that I never met you in person, but here we are. So I think let's just jump in. Let's
We're
do
in person
this.
now.
Yeah, this is great. But yeah,
Well,
let's just take the floor. It's
awesome.
all.
Well,
Thanks
thanks,
for
Mike.
joining us. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on how this goes, if we have more people join us, I'll probably stick to the format. This will be the second time I've given this talk. We can stick to the format, or we can kind of just go off the rails and have a conversation, since there's a smaller group of us, and that's always fun too. But the overall plan for today would be for me just to say hi, give you a little bit of context, go over 6 strategies that I'm using at RS21, the company that I'm the director of design at right now, to make sure that my teams are happy, healthy, and high performing. And then I'd like to close the talk with some resources and facilitate kind of a discussion where I don't talk and the group gets to talk. So ideally, I can kind of whip through this content in about 45 minutes roughly, and then we'll hopefully have like a half hour or more to talk. Sometimes I'm joined by Jill. Jill's a senior designer on my team, and she is the founder of a very important part of RS21 that we call the Employee Wellbeing Group. And I'll get into more of what that is. And Jill did not get this on her calendar tonight, and I asked her if she was going to join, and she said, I might show up, I might not show up. So if Jill shows up, she's a great person to connect with and ask questions specifically about our Employee Wellbeing Group. But I don't know if she's going to be here. So this is going to be a ton of information. Grab a beer, grab a snack, do your laundry, turn off your video, bring your kids in. It does not matter to me. This is your free time. So hopefully this is just a good time for you to sit back, take in some information, and not have to think too hard. So I work at a company called RS21, and this is a picture of beautiful downtown Albuquerque where our office is. It is a strange office. It is a anomaly building. It's a Italian Renaissance style building that was built in the early 1900s, and it used to be Occidental Bank. But inside, we're your pretty typical, straightforward tech company, right? We've got the bean bags, and we've got the office dog, and we have, lunches that are catered in and projections on the wall. Now, of course, that's not all happening right now because of the pandemic, but this was what our office looked like before we all got grounded. Our company has kind of really, I'd say, so people ask all the time, well, what does RS21 stand for? The beginning of this company started out as resilient solutions for the 21st century. And so our business model has always been focused around resiliency. And a lot of times when we started, we were talking about federal government infrastructure resiliency, community resiliency around issues about healthcare, or like planning for natural disasters and things like that. But really, we started to kind of spread into all sorts of areas of resiliency. And, I love this company where I work. We're headquartered in Albuquerque. We are kind of going remote as a result of the pandemic. We've been around for about 6 years. We've got 65 employees or more across 9 states. And we tend to win all of these really cool awards. And I'll just throw it out there. We don't win these awards because we're better than anybody. We win these awards because our marketing team is better than everybody. So shout out to Natalie and Megan because they do a great job. And this year we had won Inc. 500's fastest growing private companies. We are one of Fast Company's best places for innovators to work. And so not only did we win these awards this year and able to go remote, we actually had our best year ever in 2020. And it's somewhat of a crazy story because, I think that we are to some extent an outlier. We started off 2020, and I'm just going to be frank, horribly. We ran into one of our biggest customers from the federal government backed out and said, we don't really need your services anymore. We had to go through a round of layoffs. And at the beginning of 2020, it was just like, this is the worst thing in the world. And this happened right before the pandemic hit. So we got a 1-2 sucker punch in that we had financial issues, and then we went right into the pandemic. And so I think this story that I'm going to be sharing with you is pretty interesting because we're an outlier, especially in Albuquerque, maybe less in Los Angeles, but we're really progressive. And, I gave this talk a couple of weeks ago, and not everything I'm going to bring up is going to work in every culture or every context, but I'm hoping that you'll get at least, 5 things from this talk that you can take and immediately apply to the teams you lead or to the way that you engage with your peers at your organization. And so, we did some of this foundational stuff that I'm going to be talking about. We started it about 2 years ago, and that actually put us in an amazing place to bounce back from the little glitch we had from a business perspective and COVID, and have our strongest year ever, financially, emotionally, work-wise, award-wise. And we'll get to this, but actually we have data and metrics on staff happiness and satisfaction, which as a services company is incredibly important. So what does RS21 do? We're this crazy, black box in the desert, like you do in the desert. But the mission of RS21 is really, we're a force for good. And we typically work with any sort of organization that wants to make data-driven decisions that positively impact the world. And we do that through providing innovative solutions that provide new insight, that are intuitive to use, that are inspiring, and that they're intellectually honest. Sometimes we kind of jokingly say that we are like the anti-Palantir, but we work in a lot of the similar kinds of spaces. And so our domains that we work in are healthcare, climate change, infrastructure analysis, social equity, resilience, sustainability, renewable energy, cybersecurity, national labs R&D. I mean, there's so many things that we do. Really, like, our metric is, are you using data to make better decisions? And are you not screwing up the world when you do it? And so it was cool to hear you say, Adam, that you're at the place where you're starting to turn work away. I'm kind of in the same situation here at RS21, luckily, with our team, where we're able to have a couple of clients who come in and maybe they're not aligned with us. And we're able to say, I'm sorry, that sounds like really interesting data science and data visualization work, but it doesn't align with our values. And so we are a mission and values driven organization. And this is just so important to me, particularly. It's one of my funny war stories. When I started here, my boss, Charles Rath, who is an awesome human being, came and said, here's a bunch of goals for, I think it was 2019. And I said, okay, but who cares? And he's like, what do you mean, who cares? These are our goals. And I was like, these are just numbers on a piece of paper. This doesn't tell us anything about like what we're supposed to be doing, who we are, and what we stand for. And so as an organization, we took a step back, and instead of just hunting after these numeric goals, we need to make this much profit, we need to sell this much work, we stepped back and took some time and said, who are we as a company? And so these are our 9 values. Do good with data, evoke childlike wonder, disrupt, evolve and learn, be humble, be real, sustain the movement, cultivate our communities, and love humanity. And so this makes this a really awesome place to work. And it's also great that I had a chance to kind of be part of creating these and guiding the company towards being values driven. So if you're in like startup mode, or if you're in a place to kind of assert any sort of authority at your organization, this is a super great move that I think leads to a really healthy and happy culture. So this is a picture of us in the before times, before we all got grounded. And, we're relatively diverse in all sorts of ways team. We truly enjoyed being together. These are all very genuine smiles. It wasn't forced, and we were totally screwing around that day. But then COVID hit. If any of you are into NFTs and Beeple, this is a Beeple artwork. I just like to throw that in there, since everyone's like, what's a Beeple and what's an NFT? That's a whole nother talk. I'm not going to go into the details of the pandemic, but we've all experienced it. It's been emotionally, financially, physically, it's just been hard. It's been real. And I'm not going to say it hasn't impacted us. Even though we had the best year that we've ever had as a business, it's still been very, very, very hard. And the way that I choose to talk about it is just everyone is cosmically tired. Like on a cellular level, we are tired. And sometimes it gets better and sometimes it gets worse. So this is a picture of us now. I will say that again, our marketing team photoshopped this so everybody had a nice, pretty smile on, but we typically are still having a good time. We're all turning our cameras on. And I have to say, it is truly the fact that we're a values-based organization. And through the work of our employee well-being group, that's a whole little bit that I'll get to. These are the two things that really got us through the pandemic. If you see the logo down here in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that resiliency is really not about what happens when a crisis hits. It's about how you recover from the crisis. And so I just think it's really poetic and kind of cheesy, depending on your perspective, that we were able to take a really big hit at the beginning of 2020, and now we are basically here. So we were able to live the brand identity of our logo last year, and it was pretty cool. So, we're the highest performing we've ever been. We've got the highest staff retention rate, and it's really because of the things that I'm going to share with you in this talk. Any questions about RS21 or my team or anything like that before I jump into the how we did it? Nope. Okay, I'll keep going then. So I was actually, when I started writing this talk, I was just blurting out notes, and I started to think about information architecture like I do, because I can't remove information architecture from the way I see the world. And I started to realize when I was grouping and kind of card sorting my strategies, that they just happen to fit into some of the values of my organization. And so the structure of this talk is really going to be me going through these 6 values from RS21 and talking about how I, as a member of the senior leadership team, as a manager of the design team, how I employ different tactics to kind of meet these strategies as a leader on my team. So the first one, and this is the longest section. So if you get through Be Humble and you're like, oh my gosh, that took forever, just know that it goes faster from here on out. But really, Be Humble is about setting that emotional tone. And there are several ways to do that. And the first way I really like to do is something I learned back when I worked with the awesome guys at the Understanding Group, or TUG. The concept of servant leadership is incredibly important in terms of how I manage my team and how I expect other leaders at this organization to operate. Servant leadership basically means that the more senior you are, the more responsibility you have to protect and to serve your team. You do things like you manage up to C-suite, and you be a shit umbrella, for lack of better words, to say, I'm going to protect you from the garbage that you don't need to even worry about, so you can focus on how awesome your life is. And I can give you anything you need to get your job done. My job is to clear the way for you and be your servant as your leader. Sharing credit and taking blame. I've had some major biffs on my team, and I had a junior designer just flipping out, and they were like, well, I messed it up. And I said, listen, there were 3 people above you in that room. You did nothing wrong. The 3 people above you did not hold it together and were not prepared. So that is not on you. That is on the people who are more senior to you, because they were not there. And then, I think this kind of leadership mentality is easier if you have values as an organization, and you can say, this is what we stand for. This is how we treat each other. This is how we come to work. And even if you're in a situation where you don't have that kind of culture, you can do small things as a leader to kind of start this relationship with your team members. It could be as simple as saying to your team in your one-on-ones, or just in an offhand conversation, what can I do to help you with that? Or what do you need from me? Or what's one thing I can do to make your life better this week? And if you just go and ask these kind of servant-minded questions, you find out a lot about what's actually going on in your team's life, and you can kind of be there to protect them from things that maybe aren't going great in their life. The second thing I think about the concept of being a humble leader is to have some emotional self-awareness. And so I really think that being responsible for knowing your feelings and how you show up in your team, in your peer group, in your professional community is incredibly important. Bringing your best self to work is not pretending you don't have feelings or covering up feelings in a way that's unhealthy. Bringing your best self to work is identifying in advance where you're feeling, how you are feeling, and being willing to talk about how you're feeling with your team, with your peers, and of course, appropriately, right? Like if you're having some very, dramatic interpersonal things, maybe you don't need to tell your brand new designer about them, but you can say, hey man, I am feeling really let down in some other part of my life. So if I seem cranky, it's not you, it's that I'm having legit feelings. And so the woman that I sometimes co-host this talk with, Jill, we were talking in our one-on-ones and she started doing this. She would get to a point where she'd be frustrated about something and she'd go, okay, I'm going to do a vibe check. And when she was doing a vibe check, really all she was doing was pulling up this feelings wheel that I've got on the screen. This is a tool I got from my therapist. And essentially feelings are a lot easier to be aware of if you can title and label them. So there's a little bit of information architecture here, right? It doesn't exist unless you can label it. And so being able to label your feelings and be intentional about how you come to work with those feelings is that bit of being a humble leader that can really set the tone for your team. This one it always cracks me up to talk about this with UX designers because we already know this one, but empathy is incredibly important. And the biggest thing here is some advice that I got from my brother when I started managing teams a long time ago. I called my brother, and my brother managed a warehouse team at a furniture store, and he's a great manager. And I said, what advice do you have for me? I have no idea what's going on, and I'm sure management is management. And he said, yeah, the number one thing that you can do is realize that each person on your team is an individual. They are not you. They don't want to be you. They're not the CEO. They don't want to be the CEO. They're not that guy over on that team. They don't want to be that guy on that team. They want to be themselves. And you need to have a view of them that they're individuals and listen to them and really kind of identify with them as the true person they are instead of who you want to see them as. And I was like, oh my gosh, my brother, the warehouse manager, just gave me the best, UX design management information that I could possibly receive. And, again, does this mean that you need to be a master of empathy and have compassion for every single thing that everybody on your team says? Not necessarily, but it's just as simple as listening to your team and realizing that some issues don't need a solution, that you can just say, yeah, I hear you. I feel with you. I feel for you. These things right here on this chart, you can say these things and listen and not make assumptions about what's going on. A small thing that I've done that it probably sounds like common sense, but take time to know as much about your employees as you can that seems appropriate within your work culture. So do you know their pets' names? Do you know what they're doing on the weekend that they're excited about? Not necessarily prying or making your staff feel uncomfortable, but I can't tell you how much it means to somebody on my team when I check back in and say, hey, your cat had to go to the vet a couple weeks ago. How's your cat? Even just keeping that kind of communication open with my team, so it's not just about work, means that we have that kind of humble, connected relationship, which I think is very, very helpful. Now, empathy will only get you so far. And I kind of was talking about that on the last slide a little bit, but validation, I think, is possibly even more important than empathy. Empathy is something that you kind of keep inside of your head, that you identify with, that you use as a lens in which you engage with your staff and your team. Validation, I heard this quote probably on Instagram the other day or something like that, but I really like this idea that validation is empathy demonstrated. So how are you demonstrating actively that you do actually have empathy for your team? A small affirmation can go a long way, even if you don't agree with what your team person is saying, or you can't quite empathize with them. Saying that's valid or you're not imagining that goes a long way, even if you can't necessarily solve the problem in that moment. I think another thing to kind of keep in mind is the concept of avoiding bullshitting or spinning things, right? Like, I think sometimes as leaders, we get pressured to, oh, it's great, everyone just buckle up, or we're going to get through this. But there is too much positivity. And I really love this slide, really kind of having this thought of validation versus toxic positivity. Toxic positivity basically is erasing the reality of the individual that you are serving on your team by saying things like positive vibes only, or failure is not an option, or look for the silver lining, instead of in that moment saying, I'm here for you. I see you. This is hard. And I think this kind of gets into the idea of acknowledge that just because you personally don't experience it doesn't mean it's not happening. So this is a whole nother talk, and I'm sure there are people out there better to give it. But if we get into concepts like microaggressions or code switching or gender bias, just because I don't experience it as a leader doesn't mean it's not happening. And being able to sit and listen and say, wow, that upsets me that you're going through that. I'd like to have a conversation, or I really think that you should go talk with HR about this, is going to be important. I do have a caveat here. I'm not suggesting as a leader that you become a dumping ground. I'll get to a little bit more on that in the future, but there is a difference between enabling helplessness and validation, and I would encourage you to think about validation. And I think this is the last slide on be humble. But really, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Brené Brown and the concept of vulnerability. Vulnerability is incredibly important in being a humble leader. And that is, what does that look like? It's you being willing to speak your truth, to be your whole weird human, nuanced, and I'll say, but professional, right? Let's not overshare and make people grossed out by weird stuff. It's okay to not know. It's okay to say to somebody who's asking you a question as a leader, I don't really know. And this can feel kind of scary if you're new to this, because sometimes I think we've been socialized in our careers or by other leaders that we might have had, that, you know, we have to be the superhero and we have to always know the answer and we have to be on the ball and I'm going to solve that for you. And I think just welcoming and soliciting feedback and then taking action when someone cares enough to share it with you is a way that you can say all of these things in once. I'm a humble leader. I am here for you. I am trying to, be my whole human self. I'm going to apologize. And by modeling this kind of humble behavior, I think this is the first part of having a happy, healthy, and high-performing team. And so I'll close this section with a couple of questions that I'd say are kind of more self-reflection questions, but what kind of leader are you? What kind of leader do you want to be? How do you know and how do you manage what vibes you're bringing to your team? How do you validate your team? And what's one thing you might be able to do to be a more humble leader? And so I don't know the size of our group right now, if we want to stop and chat and do a round robin, or if we want to keep cranking through and go to the next section. I'll leave that up to our meetup facilitators here. Any thoughts?
Well, it looks like we have 12 people here. I don't know, Crystal, you're really the timekeeper. I just want to make sure that we're not going to run too long, but
Yeah.
in your experience, Jessica, does it work better to stop it, or is it better for you to continue?
Here's what I'll say. I'll pause at each of these slides and say, if anybody's got a burning question or like a burning suggestion or something they just really need to get off their chest, let's go for it. But if not, the end of this is going to be a facilitated conversation and we'll have plenty of time to talk.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Let's save all the applause till the end.
Okay. Any burning questions or insights or things that you've done that have worked, or shall we move on? Okay, moving on.
Great, thanks.
So the second thing that I think is really important is this concept of evolving and learning. And really, what does that mean? To me, as a leader, that means to engage and challenge my team. So some of the tenets of that are really around the concept of, number one, you need to have a great team, right? If you're going to have a team that you're going to engage and challenge, you need to have a great team. And the way, I think the quickest way to do that is to hire people who are different, smarter, and more talented than you are. Hire people that will be able to take your job in a couple of years. Hire people that can teach you things and can teach people things at your company. I think really this concept of diversity, equity, inclusion gets a lot of lip service, and there's a lot of brochures that companies can hand out about this, but really thinking about, it's not just about DEI, it's really about, are you creating a good culture where people of all sorts of different types can feel that they have belonging and that they are being challenged to be their best selves, and challenging those around them to be their best selves as well. I think that, investing in this as an organization and really thinking it through about who do you want to hire, why do you want to hire them, how are you going to, put it out in the world that you want to hire like this, and where you want to find people who are applicants for your jobs, and maybe it's not just Indeed or that recruiter, I think has made a lot of positive changes in RS21's hiring in the past year. We actually did start a diversity, equity, and inclusion team because we realized that our leadership teams are looking pretty white and pretty male, and that needs to change if we're going to have a truly equitable and inclusive environment. And so we're starting to look at that as, it's one of the things we have to work on. We're not great at it, but it's our responsibility as leaders to say that this is a priority because we do want to have a great team. Another way to, I think really encourage your team to evolve and learn is to provide meaningful work. This is a great diagram that I love. It's ikigai is how you say the part in the center. And essentially it's the thought that you can do something professionally that the world needs, that is your passion, and it can be really what you love too. And if you can find work that is the intersection of all of these areas, and if you can provide this kind of work for your staff, people are going to be just so much more intrinsically motivated. If you're working towards the same goals with your team, that also helps. I set collaborative goals for my division each year, and we work on them quarterly, and we check in. And they're not goals that I come to my team and say, hey, you need to do this thing. It's where we sit down as a team and say, what do we want to work on this year? The other way that I try to balance this is to make sure that everybody on my team has one thing that their eyes light up about, that they're just super excited about. And not only do they have one thing that they're working on right now that they're excited about, they actually have something down the road that's coming in, work on the horizon that they're excited about too. And I think, the other way to really get people excited and getting them to evolve and learn and challenge themselves is to not only just reward people technically with great work and emotionally with praise, but I think having a financial component for rewarding your staff for doing great work is really important. And so one of the big changes that happened last year is RS21 went to be 100% of staff at our company at all levels all have shares in the company or stock options. We haven't had a saleable event yet, so they're not actually shares. I need to correct that. But every single person at the organization, from a brand new office admin to the most senior C-suite leader, all has shares in the company. And that is something that I think is pretty unique and pretty rare, but we're going as an organization and saying, we're all in this, everyone's valuable, and, rising tide should raise all ships. And so that I think really helps people feel like they are valuable and that they are part of the success of the company, which incentivizes them to do great work. This might be one of the more controversial things I say. I don't think it's controversial at all. But I really like to think about managing my team in terms of being strengths-based instead of being weaknesses-oriented. So it's this somewhat radical idea that everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and that people will be happier, do better work, feel that more sense of belonging, feel innately valuable and empowered to make decisions if you really take time as a manager to lift up and develop your staff's strengths and find ways to acknowledge their weaknesses, but work around them. This kind of cracks me up because, there are people on my team who are like, ugh, I hate copywriting. I don't want to do this, that I'm just so bad at it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And they're like, well, I'm not going to be in trouble because I didn't copy edit all of my stuff. And I'm like, no, find somebody who wants to do it. There's somebody at this company who's super psyched to read this paper and go through with a red pen and make all of the changes. You're going to make their day. And sure enough, we have a copy editing channel on Slack. People jump on that. And so when my team's like, I don't want to do it, I don't like it, I'm like, cool, it's not your strength, no big deal. Now, if somebody doesn't have any strengths that you need at your organization, it's probably time to help them find a different organization. But really, as a leader, as a manager, finding everyone's strengths and positioning them to use those strengths gets people incredibly excited. I do see this as a very big part of inclusion. And I also think that co-creating your employees' self-directed goals can kind of activate this. So you make sure that they're growing in ways that they want to, they're sharpening their strengths, and you're giving them work that makes them feel fulfilled. And then the last thing I think about Evolve and Learn is it's really important to invest in your people's growth. There's different ways to do this, like the ways I just talked about, but also through funded professional and personal development. So you can do this in individual chunks, you can do this in group chunks, on and off the clock. Really kind of getting to say, I hear you. You want to grow in this area. I want to make sure that you've got time and money set aside so you can grow while you're here, because I want you to stay. I want you to continue to be part of this community. And I want you to level up in ways that feel meaningful to you and your strengths. And so what we do at RS21 is I think we get like 2 days and $500 each employee to pursue any kind of professional development. And then I, as a director, have a small budget to do like a mandatory group training to kind of say, hey, we're all going to get this knowledge, and it's not going to come out of your personal professional development budget. Now that's pretty small compared to some of the larger companies, but for a startup, we're happy, and we know that we need to get better at this, but we're starting someplace and we're making a marked commitment to professional development for all of our team. So the reflection questions that I'll leave for the Evolve and Learn section is, who do you hire and why do you hire them? Do you and your team derive meaning and joy from the work you do? What goals are you working towards together? Were they co-created or were they kind of dumped on your team? Would strengths-based management work for your team or organization? And do you invest in your team's growth? Any burning thoughts, questions, comments? Nope. Okay. So the next part is this thought of disrupt. That's one of our values. And the way that I think about this is disrupt is empowering your staff, really giving them a voice and allowing them to kind of be a change agent in the organization. You know, one of the pieces of feedback that we got from one of our staff through our employee well-being surveys, and I'll talk about that in just a second, is this concept of the desire to be the architect of your own solutions. And so when I say that is, complaints aren't really signals that something's horrible or something's wrong. Complaints are signals that positive change can happen in your organization. And I truly feel that the best ideas come from staff. It does not necessarily come from C-suite or senior leadership. And so really getting your staff in a position where they're encouraged to figure it out is incredibly important in having a happy, healthy, high-performing team. I learned, I had some management training last year here. And one of the things that I learned that I thought was pretty interesting is, as a manager, you have this thought that, you know, oh, if I'm being a servant leader, I'm going to come in and I'm going to protect everybody from everything all the time. What I didn't realize is that swooping in and fixing everything for everybody actually reduces my team's ability to kind of strengthen their problem-solving skills. And also, when you solve a problem as a human being, you get this hit of dopamine, of satisfaction that you've successfully solved a problem. And as a manager, I'm sitting there hitting the solve the problem button, and I'm getting all the points and all the satisfaction, and I'm robbing my team of that. So I do like to step back sometimes and say, is this something that you can figure out, or do you really need to tap me into this? And I think that gives staff a sense of ownership and longevity, and they're willing to stick it out through the hard times. If they're coming to the table and they're trying to co-create a reality and they see things are changing, they're seeing that their ideas are getting pushed forward, that really, I think, gets people through some rough times. And so this is where I'm going to start talking about our employee well-being group. So one of my employees, my senior UX designer, after a year here, she came to me and she said, during her annual review, she said, you know, Jess, I love this. The work is great. I think I finally figured out what's going on from a domain and a UX perspective. And she said, but you know, I have got a lot of complaints about the company as a whole. And she said, I don't really want to dump on you. And I don't even know if this is the right place to do it. And I was like, no, go for it. Like, tell me what's going on. And she had this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 70, 48, she just had this huge list of things. And she goes, is this like so unhelpful? And I said, no, this is super, super helpful. And I said, we're a small startup. We don't really have HR right now, which is typically the kind of organizational unit that would handle these things. And I said, like, what do you think we should do? And Jill said to me, she goes, when I was at REI in Seattle, we had this super awesome thing where we had like a UX, the team kind of setup where we would send out surveys every so often, get anonymized feedback from the staff where there's a problem and here's a solution. We would do kind of like our affinity mapping and our themes extraction. So kind of UX, all of the different things that came back and bubble up, not isolated anecdotes or outliers, but say, here's a theme. The theme is that people don't think there's pay equity at the company. Here's a theme. The theme is that people want to bring their pets to work. So it's all the way from big issues to little issues. And it's really kind of like UXing the company. And so I said to Jill, I said, hey, listen, like that sounds like a great idea. And I said, do you want to start it and lead it? And she was like, I don't know, I've only been here a year. And it seems like that's a lot. And I was like, I don't know, it's what we're doing is nothing and that's not working. So maybe we should just try this and see how it goes. And really our employee well-being group, in addition to being a values-based organization, I think is kind of one of the cornerstones of how we did have our best year ever. And so this is just some data that we received in terms of, these are kind of some of the questions that we ask, and we do a year review. And this is what we learned happened in 2020. We had 87.5% of our staff rated good or excellent in terms of, are you satisfied with RS21 as an employer? And that represented a 24% increase this year. How satisfied are you in your role? 74% were good or excellent, which was a 19% increase. And then would you recommend working here to a friend? 74% were at good or excellent. And that's a 15.4% increase in 2020. And so really our satisfaction went up by not just having the survey, but by bubbling up these issues, creating a space where people could say things, and then allowing people to be the architect of their own solution. Instead of just saying, this is upsetting me about work, this is upsetting me and here's what I think we should do. Now, are we able to do everything that comes through the employee well-being satisfaction surveys? Not always, no, but there's usually a call and response. If the employee well-being group says to C-suite, hey, we think, you need to buy everyone a pony because that's the biggest theme right now. If the C-suite comes back, they'll say, hey, you know what? We can't have ponies because there's zoning law issues and we don't have the budget for it. There's communication as to why a recommendation is not going to be acted on. And there's usually something about, but when we open up our rural Tennessee office, we can all have ponies there. So there's a bit of optimism put out by our senior leadership to say, this is a great idea. We understand why everybody wants a pony, and this is how we're going to manifest this in the next couple of years, but you can't have a pony right now. So just please be cool. And that seems to be just one of the biggest things that drives people feeling like they're part of the company and that they're being listened to. Now, how do we create the environment in which this is possible? And it's really about creating this sense of psychological safety. This is an image from Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist that I love. And I saw this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago and I was like, oh, I need to put that in my slides. But really some simple things you can do as a leader is to signal boost and champion your team's ideas, especially if they're speaking up with something that's unpopular or maybe makes them feel a little vulnerable. This is really kind of the hands down most important thing to get people to speak up, is to really, say like, hey, oh, it's okay that we messed that up. We're going to do better next time. Speaking your mind, saying unpopular things, bringing up new ideas yourself. signal boosting your team when they say something, echoing things and saying, oh yeah, Tom said that last week. That's a great idea. Remember when Tom said that? So just that signal boosting and echoing your team's ideas and being advocates for your team is really, really important. And so how do you create complete psychological safety at an organization? I have no idea. This is something that we are learning into at RS21, and we're not always great. Some people feel very empowered to disrupt and to speak up and to bring new ideas to the table. And other people are still like, I don't know, I'm new here. This is pretty weird. Or I've been here for 3 years and I still don't feel like I should be bringing these kinds of things up. I will say though, we just had a town hall meeting, which is the employee well-being group will kind of lob very challenging questions at our C-suite, and our C-suite has to answer them kind of on the fly. We did have a newish employee just kind of stand up in the last town hall meeting and said, well, you say we have a flexible work schedule, but here's the 8 reasons why we don't. And here's 9 models of flexible work schedule that I want you to consider. And our CEO was like, these are all awesome ideas. Send me the list. Is everyone going to get, a 20-hour work week? Probably not. Are we going to consider things like working 4 days a week at 9 or 10 hours a week and having Fridays off? Maybe for some people that will make sense. But really this idea of psychological safety to encourage people to speak their minds is incredibly important. And so this is another thing probably from therapy, but I'm sure we've all heard the hurt people. I think the same is true of empowerment. Empowered people empower people. So giving people agency kind of spreads in your organization. If I empower Jill to start the EWB, she's empowering people to come to her with new ideas, right? And so eventually this starts to grow like a positive crystalline structure across your organization. And so encouraging direct communication and conflict management, encouraging your staff to go direct in good and challenging times, and having their backs when things get tough are really the best ways to empower your team. So the last kind of things I will ask you to consider is, do you regularly step back and let people co-create solutions in your organization? Are your employees happy and healthy? How do you know? How is failure and experimentation viewed at your organization? How do you empower your team? And what's one thing you could do to empower your team even more? Any burning questions, comments, or thoughts? Nope.
It's so lovely. Jess, it's so lovely. But I'll let somebody else ask other questions or make other comments.
Yeah, the employee survey,
Yes.
I think is a really good approach. It shows that the company cares. The challenge is, like, as you scale it out to larger groups where you have less control over the people reviewing the surveys, you can get individuals that don't have or provide that psychological safety. And it can go terribly bad because within a small group, you can identify who is giving the negative answers. Yeah. And things just kind of spin out of control. So.
And that's a terrifying thing that we are actually starting to come up against. We had somebody say something relatively controversial in one of our last staff meetings, and everyone was like, oh, that's really controversial. And there was one person on the leadership team who was like, I'd like to know who that is. It wasn't really said anonymously because you can tell. And I'm like, And our employee well-being group all set up like a united front and was like, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to violate confidentiality. That was an anonymous comment. I said, we can have a conversation about how much anonymity we guarantee going forward, but we're not going to retroactively undo this, because that would 100% be destroying that psychological safety. And so it was a tussle, right? But we got there. And I don't know what this looks like when we're 300 people. I have no idea. Maybe it's by division. Maybe it's by, one of the things Jill talked about was maybe it needs to be an external person who doesn't really work for the company, like a ombuds or something like that. And I was like, I don't know, we'll cross that when we get there. But thank you. And also, hi, it's good to see you. So number 4, sustain the movement. And I think a lot of this talk that I've already given is stuff that is pretty COVID independent. It doesn't matter. These are just kind of good practices overall. Sustaining the movement is the one I think that came up really, really hardcore this past year. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think, my biggest flaw as a leader in this is like, I remember last year, I was like, oh, it's going to be 2 months, no big deal. And here we are still all working remotely and still going through that ebb and flow of like, is this real? Is this my life? Is this society now? And so in order to sustain the movement started off kind of as like a financial thing, like we need to be a profitable business because we're a business. But as we started to talk about it as our values working group, we realized that it was a lot about sustaining the emotional well-being and health of our teams. It doesn't matter how much money we're making if we're burning through people. I've heard a lot of people who work at, Amazon or Facebook or some of the larger companies say, wow, I don't feel like anything besides a cog. And we're realizing that we really need to not have that be reality here. And so the first thing that I do as a manager, and this is something that it's kind of funny. It's not only something I teach to my team, but it's something that I work with new leaders at the company, because new leaders will come into the company and say, yep, I'll do it. Yep, I can do it. I got it done tonight. I can do it over the weekend. I can do 4 of those. I will sell that. And I'm like, hold on. Like, I dig your optimism, but like, you need to learn some professional boundary setting. And so boundary setting, I think sometimes people freak out and say, oh, well, that means that I'm not being a team player. That means that I'm saying no, I'm getting a bad reputation as a person who's hard to work with. And I really like to encourage people to think about boundaries in a different way. Boundaries are about knowing your limits and teaching other people to respect them. They're about learning and respecting other people's limits. And at the end of the day, it's really about what is healthy for you. And again, getting back to that slide where I said everybody's an individual, I don't care what time of night it is. I'll send out an email at 2 a.m. I'll work on Saturday. I'll also, take a long morning and go have coffee. So it doesn't matter to me that I'm doing that. But if I'm sending an email to somebody who has told me once 5 o'clock comes, I'm done, I will write in the email, sorry for the late email, do not respond to this until tomorrow. And I also don't ever push people on that. I respect their boundaries. To that concept too of setting professional boundaries. And I love this slide. It's things that people can say at work and they won't get fired and they won't be bad people, but it really sets you up to deliver what you can deliver and do it at a good level. I've really been working with my team. When I came in, I was like, just tell them no. No, you're not doing that. No, you can't make that deadline. No, you can't, update that wireframe one more time. No, you can't have a different UI theme. No. And what I'm working with my team on now is that we've gotten good at no. Now we're working on what I'm calling a path to yes. So instead of saying, no, I can't do that, it's, I'd love to do that, but I'm going to need you to help me figure out how to prioritize these 8 other things. If you're going to ask me to do this thing, how are you going to get these other things off of my plate? Or, you know what? For me, it's always business development work. It's like, no, I can't get that proposal done today. I don't have time to think about it, but I can get that proposal done by Thursday, end of day. Is that going to be okay? So that negotiation, that helping your team prioritize, that helping them go to project managers or whoever and saying like, hey, that's not happening right now, but here's what I need to have it happen is a really good way to set boundaries with people, but still kind of work towards a common solution. And some of these things can be really, really simple. The 2 things that I empower my team to do, and I've kind of started to ask other directors at my company to empower their teams to do, is really simple. Block out your calendar for working time. I'm sorry, if you can't, you've got 3 hours to work today. Well, they're in 15-minute increments. I'm sorry, that's not meaningful time to do what I need to do in UX or UI or strategy. So I tell my team, whatever your working increment is, you need to block those calendar times off on your calendar. Say, I'm not available for meetings. And then when somebody invites you to a meeting, decline the meeting with a note that says, I am not available for this. Can you find another time? Now we have to be a little bit flexible when it comes to client meetings sometimes, but if it's an internal meeting, No, find another time. And then the other thing I encourage my team to do is to turn down meetings that don't have a clear focus or don't need your input. It's like, I'll get invited to a meeting where there's, 5 members of my design team there. And I'm like, do I need to be here? No, you guys got this. Peace. I'm not going to this. Or I'll say, hey, it looks like you're really busy. Do you need me to go to this? Yes. Okay. I've got it covered. Don't go to that meeting. We'll catch up on it later. Or you can read the notes that I'm taking. So these are just kind of ways to set boundaries. And I think that this goes a long way towards sustaining the movement, and keeping your team kind of feeling sane. This, this slide always cracks me up. And this is a little bit, this is funny. This comes from a woman who's basically my sister-in-law. She had a baby with my brother. They're not married, but she's basically my sister-in-law. And she gave this fantastic talk at an IA summit many years ago about giving the right amounts of shit. Giving the right amount of shits. So this really is a good way to kind of apply Stoic philosophy to the craziness that is your work life. And, thinking about what are the problems that I can actually impact? What are the ones that I can impact that will actually improve my happiness? And then of those, what are the ones, the handful of them that I'm actually going to focus my time and energy on? And then in the interim, I'm not going to have feelings about having feelings about these other things. I'm going to let them go. I'm going to accept that they are reality. And I'm going to focus on the areas where I can really give the right amount of shits and have a measurable impact in my own life. And so this is really kind of, like I said, Stoicism, some of it's mindfulness, saying I'm going to be present in the moment. I'm not going to worry about this other thing that's outside of my control. And I've also, kind of speaking of boundaries, talking with my team about the art of detachment, another thing I got in therapy, but saying I'm not available to take that on right now. It's not that I don't want to. It's not that I can't. It's not that maybe I won't reconsider it in the future. It's not that I'm saying it's not my responsibility. It's just I am not available to take that on right now. And that is such a powerful statement in terms of deciding what you are going to do and what you are not going to do. So that's a little, probably the most philosophical slide. And, I think another thing about sustaining the movement, and this is really important as a leader, it's been hard. We feel like we are on all the time, that we have to be that good role model for our team. We have to be the safety in the storm. But sometimes the best thing to do is just to recognize that you are overwhelmed as a leader, understand where you're going to have the most impact, and trust and delegate. This is something I see especially challenging for new leaders and new managers, is to say, I don't need to make that decision. I trust that you can make that decision. I trust that you will do that well. I'm happy to give you my opinion or workshop it with you, but I'm going to trust that you have that and that you're going to be responsible for that. And so if you've done the other things in this talk, if you've been a humble leader, if you've encouraged your team to evolve and learn and created a space of psychological safety where they can be disruptive and make mistakes, they will take these things that you give your team to trust and delegate and say, yeah, I can handle it. Do you really need to go to that resourcing meeting? Are you the only person who can handle this business development call? If not, it's time to start thinking about what are those things that you can delegate to your team and to your peers at the organization. And there's kind of that trap as a leader where it's like, oh my gosh, if I'm not there, it's not going to happen and it's not going to happen right. No, that's not true. If that's true, you haven't set up sustainable, scalable systems, and that's where you should be focusing your energy so you can delegate these tasks to other people. And so that's kind of another way of my last slide here. It's really, really important to take care of yourself first. Before you do anything for anyone else, put on your oxygen mask first. Delegate, take some time off. And as a leader, I think it's important to advocate for healthy policies and to demonstrate self-care. And so, some of the healthy policies that I've had the opportunity to advocate for in the past year, as a recommendation from my employee well-being group, are things like mental health days, employee assistance programs, flex time. Can we be remote? Do we have permission to block off our calendars? And the more you advocate for these kinds of policies, hey, we should offer sick care days, not just vacation days. Yes, mental health should be included in the sick care days. The more that you can advocate for that, the more it'll become normalized, and the more you will create that kind of environment at your organization. And so, recently we rolled out, and this is kind of getting into the next stages of the pandemic. We rolled out a return plan for what it's going to look like when everyone gets their vaccines or chooses not to get their vaccine and comes back to the office. And I was just kind of blown away because it was so employee centric. It's not mandatory to return to the office now or ever. You can stay flex. You can come into the office a couple days of the week. You don't have to come into the office at all, even if you live in Albuquerque. If you want to start going to the office and you never have before, let's figure it out. And it was just super employee friendly. And there was a footnote at the end saying, and we're going to look at how we can have even more flexible schedules because we do realize that that's an issue. And so would we have said that a year ago? I don't think so. But we are adapting to the changing world, and our leadership is really saying we need to have employee-centric, healthy policies that take into account the diversity of the people who don't want to get a shot, the people who have enjoyed staying at home with their kids, the people who are now responsible for elder care and they really can't come to the office anymore. Life has changed, and so our policies need to change. And the last thing I always do is really recommend highly self-care. Practice it and encourage your staff to do it too. I take my vacation. I turn off Slack. I will say, no, I can't make that meeting because I have a therapist appointment. I normalize these things. I talk about them. I keep it open and honest. And I say, yeah, you know what? It's way more important that you go get your tooth fixed at the dentist than it is to come to this meeting. We'll get coverage for you, no problem. So that self-care bit is incredibly important because we've all been going through it. This year's been insane. And practicing that self-care and modeling it for your team is probably one of the most important things you can do. So in terms of sustaining the movement, what are your professional boundaries? What are your staff's professional boundaries? What's one thing that you can control that would increase your personal happiness? Could you delegate 3 things to someone else? Do you model and encourage self-care? And are there any healthy policies you'd like to advocate for at your organization? Questions or comments here? No? Okay. Getting close to the end here. This one always makes me laugh as the director of design. This is the value that my team gets shout outs for all the time. We do a great job of evoking childlike wonder with our super awesome designs. But I also think that this is an important part of a good leader for having a happy, healthy, high-performing team. Lightening the mood, again, can be an incredibly powerful tool for your team. This is a picture of the Lego movie, and this is an example of a really stupid, silly thing that happens at my work that makes me very happy. When things go rough or hard at my business, my CTO will walk into a conference room and saying, "Everything is awesome." And for the longest time, I did not know that he was singing the theme song from the Lego movie. I thought he literally made this song up and was just singing it to make us all happy. And so I would just bust out laughing anytime he'd come into a room singing "Everything is awesome." Obviously, when he's singing this, things are not awesome. And he's having a really rough time, but it's just light, it's silly. And, it's just kind of acknowledging the absurdity of what's going on. And so it's not toxic positivity because he's not saying everything is truly awesome. He's being ironic and sarcastic and saying everything is horrible. It's like the little dog on fire saying, "This is fine, this is fine." But this was one of those things that I don't even know that my boss knew that he was making me so happy when he would do this, but he was being authentic. He was being silly. He was being lighthearted. He wasn't being antagonistic or rude in his humor. He was keeping it light. He was keeping it appropriate. And so this just kind of is one of those things that you can do just to keep the mood light. And I'm not saying you should sing the Lego song. I'm saying you should do something that feels authentic to you to kind of lighten the mood for your team in a way that is appropriate. Another thing that we do at RS21, and this was really helpful in the pandemic, was to send out little gifts a cactus, cookies. We got masks with the RS21 logo on it. And it wasn't even the cookies or the cactus. It was the little handwritten note that came with all of these things where our C-suite said, we miss you. We hope you're healthy. We can't wait to see you back in the office. We hope this plant grows, and we hope that you're flourishing in your new, contained homes too, like this cactus. And it was these little kind of just truly meaningful, sincere gifts that I think helped a lot of people. And they were surprises, and they just kind of, came into our lives and really kind of lightened our lives and made us feel like we mattered and that we were still important human beings instead of just cogs that were mindlessly like filling out our timesheets and updating our Figma files. And so, okay, well, maybe your office doesn't have a lot of budget for this, or you as a director don't have money. There are some goofy things that we did to evoke childlike wonder on Slack. The thing on the left here is people just posting like pictures of their home offices and just kind of making comments like, this used to be a folding table and now it's my desk, and just like, look at all the crazy crap I have, and oh, I've lost my mind and now everything is turquoise color. And so just everybody kind of sharing their office space and saying like, here's what my reality is, helped us feel a little bit closer. At the inauguration, there was a Bernie meme. And so our marketing department made Bernie out in front of our office, and that got everybody laughing for a while, and people were reposting that on social. And then one of my favorites that I instigated was just a Slack thread where I said, name the childhood food that you missed that you had no business eating. And that got us off into a long rabbit hole of cafeteria pizza, high C coolers, meatloaf TV dinners. And it was really fun to see people from all the way from boomer generation to Gen Z have these very wildly different, like, wow, that looks like a horrible idea, you shouldn't be eating it. But it was fun to learn about each other that way. It was completely free. And I think, I tend to be a very efficient, get it done, let's not waste time, let's be super effective. And one of my big lessons as a leader this year was that wasted time is not always time wasted, right? And so I know that sounds like some meaningless platitude, but really as a person, if you're a leader, chances are you're kind of a driver, and you may need to give yourself permission to step back and be like, nah, I'm going to talk about TV dinners and my ridiculous workspace today, because it's important for me to continue to be human and evoke childlike wonder in my team. That's pretty much it. So the questions for like evoke childlike wonder, I'd say, when was the last time you actually laughed at work? What's one thing that always cheers you up, and would it cheer up anyone else too? And what's one thing you might be able to do to lighten the mood for your team? So last thing I'm going to leave you with is our kind of, I'd say it's like our basal value, love humanity. And people always laugh at me at work because I'm constantly saying, all you need to get anything done is patience and persistence. It's going to take time. It's going to take you trying again, be patient, be persistent. And, I just really feel that getting through COVID, getting through organizational change, getting through anything that's rough at work as a leader is really a Sisyphean effort, right? Like every damn day, every damn place, like you have to keep coming back to the same problems patiently and persistently. And so I think patience and persistence and loving humanity is a really great strategy for resilience. Be patient and persistent and love your team, right? They're humans. They're going through things that you have no idea that they're going through, that they're not going to share with you. Even if you do have the most humble and connected relationship, they're going through things that you'll never know. With your company, right? There might be some ideas in this where you're like, man, I want to do this at my company, but there's no way I'll ever be allowed to do that, or my leadership will never allow this to happen. But you'd be surprised what you could have happen if you are patient and persistent about change in your organization. I'd say most of all, being patient and persistent with yourself, be nice to yourself. That's probably the hardest thing, but keep getting up, keep trying, keep resting, right? Keep allowing yourself to take the break to kind of decide what you're going to care about. It's really, really important in terms of loving humanity, loving yourself, and setting a good example for people around you. Also, Jay-Z agrees with me. So I think I'm correct here because Jay-Z's pretty much never wrong. I like to kind of close pretty much everything I ever talk about with Mike Montiero from Dear Design Student. You are responsible for what you put into the world, and how it affects the world. And I think as leaders and as managers, sometimes the most important thing we put into the world is the culture and the kind of ways that we treat our teams. And so I just say, you know, think about what you're putting into the world and how it's affecting the world. So to recap, happy, healthy, high-performing teams, be humble, set the emotional tone, evolve and learn, engage and challenge your team, disrupt, empower your staff, sustain the movement. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Evoke childlike wonder, lighten the mood when you can, and love humanity, have patience and persistence with yourself. So that's pretty much all I had to go over. My slides here have a bunch of books, blogs, and articles that you can check out. I hope it was abundantly clear. These aren't my ideas that I went over today. This is like my management and leadership philosophy that I've picked up over the years. So pretty much everything in here is somebody else's idea. So these are kind of like my footnotes around where I go to think about these things and to look up things. Harvard Business Review on emotional intelligence, on different types of coronavirus thoughts, very important. Mark Manson gives solid, direct, probably not safe for work advice that I think can be very helpful about emotional accountability. The best management book I've ever read was called A Lapsed Anarchist Guide to Being a Better Leader. And that's really kind of a communitarian anarchist view on co-creating awesome environments with your team. Jonathan Coleman has a great blog about crying at work and normalizing having feelings and being a whole person. If you've not read it, it's just required reading. And then I've got a couple of helpful articles about creating a strengths-based culture. And what's funny in the workplace, there's this kind of joke where it's like, just because people are laughing doesn't mean it's funny. And so thinking about your humor can be really helpful. And I like sharing this with people who maybe aren't quite getting it at work and saying like, hey, check this out. You're not doing it right. And then these are the videos and talks that I recommend. Just great things if you've got time and you want to look through something. I find these are all great uses of time. So I just want to thank you all for your time and thank you all for your presence and engagement. It's been really cool to see you guys kind of like looking and nodding and talking. And so I want to stop talking because I've been talking for an hour now. And I want to open up a conversation to everybody on the call here. And, you know, really what I'm throwing out there, do you have any questions for me about my company, how I lead my team or our employee well-being group? What are some things that are really working well for you in terms of having happy, healthy, high-performing teams that we didn't cover here? Is anybody out there have like a problem that really you're experiencing that's limiting your ability to do these things? And what is the group's kind of recommendation for that person if they've got an issue? And are there any resources or books or blogs or people that you consult that kind of help you get through some of these challenges? And so I'm going to be quiet and open it up to the group.
Well, that's before we do that, I just want to thank you, Jess. That was fantastic. And I've been keeping an eye on the chat here, and this might be a good moment. Alicia had typed up a question that I think is worthwhile for her to just ask you herself, since you opened it up for that. So I think she is here. There she is.
I am.
Yeah.
Hello, Jess. I
Let's
missed
start
you
this.
at last year's IA conference.
I missed you too.
So here's an interesting question for you. The servant leader that I worked under left in September, and let's just say he's sorely missed. How, and you know that we've known each other for years, so sorry if
No,
you know,
go for it.
But
Go for it, yeah.
but how, you know that I'm a leader without a title, right? I've, you know, like I lead up. Some of this stuff though is like really difficult to lead up. Like prime example, today I attempted the third way to tell someone that 2.5-hour meetings are mind numbing and you can't get anything out of me past a certain point because I just glaze over. I need time to go think and process. So what are some of the ways that you've, and anybody on the meetup, what are some of the ways that you can lead up and influence an organization that's, I don't know if they're resistant or clueless or not sure.
I'm gonna be quiet and let other people talk, but I have thoughts.
I'm going to try to facilitate this. So anyone have anything they can add, or? So just a show of hands, I think we're small enough we can do that, or you can just sort of speak up. This will help. Thank you. I don't have anything to add, but 2.5 hour meeting. My God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we've all been there for those. I just had one that went, I think, about 45 minutes too long today.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had one that long. I can't even remember. So
Yeah, we never got away from them. So
Well, and they're
That's really-
recurring. You know, it's every Tuesday and every Thursday. It's like, come on, people.
oh my.
Like, we've even asked, could we break it up? But, and it's not so much about the, you know, super long meeting. It's really about trying, I don't know, maybe even just supporting my teammates that are in this with me, because I have no authority. But
So I have
don't
two
know.
recommendations.
Yeah.
The first one's chill and the second one is not chill. So the first one is around grouping together with other people and saying, let's come up with a unified group of us who have, I like the situation, behavior impact, SBI, and say, here's the situation, here's the impact, here's the behavior that we're witnessing. And then here's what would really help us. Can we co-create a solution? And if you have a group of people saying like, hey, it's not, you know, it's not just me. I'm not just here freaking out. It's like actually all of us, and we want to co-create a solution because maybe there's things that we're missing that like really make this 2-hour meeting super important, or whatever the issue is. So that's the chill, like communitarian way to do it. The not chill way is just straight up civil disobedience and being like, I can attend this meeting for an hour and I'm leaving at the hour mark. If you need me, you'll have to catch me some other time. And that really depends on your personality and your organization and how your relationships are. But I have, and that is aggressive boundary setting. And I think that's okay. It might get you in trouble, but it might also be a hard moment that can then foster some great conversations and maybe get some change happening. It could also be seen as passive aggressive and make the problem worse. So it depends on your organization, I think.
Thank you, Jess.
I have something similar where I basically have gotten to the point where I've got like, you know, not regularly scheduled meetings, but just like too many meetings. Like just some days you go through like 4 meetings, like bang, 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 bang. And it's just like, by the time you get out of it, you get all the Zoom fatigue and you just don't want to do anything and you go to sleep way too early. I do like one thing I do try to do is I do like a thing where basically like I won't even take a meeting till at least 11 o'clock in the morning. It's like, I just don't do mornings. I don't do them well. You're not going to get me. It's simple as that. It just gives me a chance to breathe. I mean, we finally get gyms back open again. We have one here in my apartment complex. So I can just go down there and just, you know, work out for an hour. Well, that has been possible for a year plus. So, you know, but once it gets back, you know, I use that a lot of times because nobody's ever in that gym. I can basically like a small apartment complex. I go in there it's like my moment of Zen. It's where I start thinking about things because nobody's there. Nobody cares. But that's not possible.
And that's a good point, Adam, about the time to think, right? My team has gotten really good at blocking the morning hours of the calendar. We've realized that the guy who's leading the team now, he's got 2 little toddlers, so he doesn't schedule early meetings, which is like, okay, quiet time. So we're blocking our morning so that we can at least work. But it's the thinking time I think we're missing, you know, and how do you create if you don't have space to think? So I like that, you know, I'm going to go to the gym and think, or for me, I'd go to my yoga mat and think.
Yep. Yeah. And another one that's also getting on my case lately with one client in particular is, you know, like they're just nowadays, it used to be like, you know, okay, you had phone, you had text, you had beepers back in the day. Now it's Slack. Now it's like Slack, and one I've never heard like Monday or Asana or other ones, mostly Slack. And it just gets to the point where like, you know, I have most of my notifications on my phone. I have most of them turned off, but Slack I don't. But you know, you have to trigger my name in most cases. But there's one client in particular, they Slack all the time. It's just like enough already. You know, like I have other clients and they don't care. But the other clients don't care either about my other clients. So that's not a surprise. So it's kind of a mental health type thing.
So I have a question kind of related to that time to think and how you kind of accept diversity of thought within a team. And I know within a lot of companies, they really focus on thinking on your feet, you know, and you go in a meeting and give an answer right away. And I did have one manager a while back where he was just perfectly comfortable saying, I'll get back to you on that. He would just write it down and get back to you on that. But there are still, you know, some groups that like to work and kind of having a working meeting and let's get this solved right now. What are the techniques that you guys are using to support your team with that, you know, don't make critical decisions in 10 minutes type of thing?
I'll actually jump on that one. Is it Christian? Am I saying your name
Yeah.
properly? Christian? I feel like we've met once before.
Yeah. Usually it was less light.
Yeah. And this is actually a Brene Brown tactic. So, you know, shout out to Brene and vulnerable leadership. But she actually recognizes with her teams that, you know, a lot of people don't think well on their feet. And some people who do think they think well on their feet, maybe not bringing even forth their best ideas. And so she breaks meetings with, all right, this is the thing we're going to do. This is the thing we need to talk about. Let's, you know, jump on a Slack call, jump on whatever, you know, medium that you have, and throw the idea out there and then come with that. Right. And it's better than putting like an email out there because, you know, then it can be ignored and not read and not prepared. But if you have that, you know, 5-minute conversation with everybody about, hey, this is the thing we're talking about in our 3 o'clock meeting today. I wanted to give you guys some time to think, some time to think about it. Right. That's a way that she recommends going about it. And our little micro team within our team definitely does that. And it works beautifully. It also makes space for my teammates who are more introverted than Tigger here.
I actually talk about that with my leadership team when I'm hiring people. And I'll say, I've got a lot of deep thinkers who need to consume the information, go be alone, think through it, collaborate with somebody else, and come back to the table with that. So I've got 5 of those. Let's get some impulsive person on this team. And I think it's good to actually make learning. So I used to be a middle school teacher. And so I think educating people about learning styles and like cognitive preferences and cognitive strengths is really, really important to say, just because that person doesn't speak up in meetings doesn't mean they don't have ideas. It means that they're not comfortable either blurting it out right now, or they want to check what they're going to say, or they want to talk to somebody else who they know has the right answer and come back. And so that's kind of that diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Like cognitive models, especially not everybody is neurotypical, right? And so like being sensitive to that and thinking about how can I make neuroatypicality a strength, and how do I create processes and communication patterns that allow for that one person to blurt it out in the meeting and I got to whiteboard this thing, but say, I don't care. That's cool that you did that. Awesome. That might be the right answer, but we're going to get everybody else's based on their learning styles and their cognitive patterns. And then we're going to make a decision. And so that's what I found is it's not about any one thing in the moment. It's about having that conversation way earlier. So it's not like, oh, well, if you're not like this, then it doesn't work. And, you know, that's part of the values of my organization though. Love humanity, right? that may not be the values at your organization. The value at your organization might be move fast and break things. And guess what? If you don't fit in with that value, probably shouldn't work there.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if that answers your question, Christian, but
Yeah, yeah,
last-
it's different approaches to
Okay.
looking at it and
Yeah.
how.
So I was going to hijack this because Jess, you just said something that really was one of the questions I put way at the beginning. And you talked, you just mentioned values about your organization. And of course, it felt like it wasn't quite there. Then you all got together and reestablished that. How long did that take? And what was the process to get to a place that feels like, clearly your logo is showing us that it works, right? You have your.
It was December 2018. And I got in a shouting match with our CEO at our leadership offsite, which is, if you know me, that's not something I'm afraid to do. And I was like, oh shit, this is a moment where it's either going to go well and I'm going to love this place forever, or I'm going to get fired. So let's see what happens. And basically my boss yelled at me, and then he messaged me later that night and he's like, hey, I'm sorry I came at you so hard in front of everybody, but like, I just don't understand what you're saying. And I feel kind of like I spent a lot of time putting together these goals, and you kind of like shit on them in front of everybody on leadership. And like, it made me feel like not a good leader. And he was being a vulnerable leader in coming to me and saying that. And so I said, hey, I get it. Not everybody just automatically speaks mission, vision, and values in the way that I do, given my previous work experience. So how about I go home and make a worksheet for you? And so this is my UX person saying, okay, so I went home and I made some Mad Libs and I came up with some examples and I made them a worksheet. And I said, I want you to fill this out. And then I want you to get your trusted advisors to help you edit it. And then we'll put it together. And he was on fire because he really values, disrupt is one of our values. And he appreciates when people step forward and say, dude, you're messing it up. And so he appreciated that about me. He also appreciated that I didn't say, you're messing it up and you're dumb and this company is hopeless. He appreciated that I came to him on his level and said, here's a worksheet. If you fill this out, we're going to be like half the way there. And so I think it took him about a week to really fill it out and think through it. And then I think he opened it up to the rest of the leadership team. And I think there were maybe like 8 of us at the time. I think we took another week. Then we had winter holiday break. I think in January, we sent it to our marketing person and copy editor to make sure it looked good. And then we rolled it out like late January, February. So, we were a company of probably about 45 people then, with a leadership team of 8. So obviously this doesn't work in all instances, but it was great.
Yeah, well, it's very nice that he was receptive to that. And do you feel without that first step of him asking you that question that you created the worksheet for him, would it have gone differently, you think? Or because I had a similar sort of thing but he never came and said, I need help. It just sort of like
he
dug his feet in and it just got worse, right? So
definitely him being a vulnerable leader opened up that for me to feel safe to do it.
Sure.
I'm kind of like a bossy person and I like making worksheets, so I probably would have done that anyway. But I don't know that I would have done it as quickly or as confidently.
Sure. Yeah, that's great though. At least it got you guys to a place that seems like it's working. It's fantastic. Any other questions, anyone? I just want to be mindful also of our time. We're getting at about the 5-minute mark. So we can have one last awesome question. Anyone?
Christian?
Well, I'm trying to let somebody else ask. So lately I've had this idea that we should be protecting kind of happy hour or that team time more, right? Protect it as we protect our work time, where you block off the calendar and there's nothing that can interrupt that no matter what. And I've been on teams where, yeah, the team critique is protected, but especially now, this team bonding happy hour time where you just talk about probably design, but now work design. I don't know. It seems like something we should do, but it's just a more recent thought that I've had. I don't know if you guys have gone through that already or thoughts around it.
So Christian, are you talking about just your private teams within your organization, or I've seen some kind of community oriented, like let's go spill tea gatherings that are just kind of broader and for the UX community and the diversity within the UX community too. So is this something just for your team?
I mean, broader to the community would be great. I'm starting slower, where it's just like within the team. Let's make sure everybody, including the manager and like, you know, the team leaders are kind of setting this time aside and really seeing it as a valuable part of work.
I, as always, have thoughts, but I want to create space for other people to share.
I think that before jumping into something like that, unless your team has already done it, is to get some input around what people want to do. As I said a moment ago, our service leader left, and someone else on the team, one of the other leaders on the team, is now trying to do those things. And, you know, God love him and got to give him credit for attempting, but he's missing the mark. He's missing the mark because he's not as clued, and he wouldn't be, right? He's not as clued into the personality of the team and what the individuals find enjoyable versus really awkward. So check with your team first and see, you know, what are some things like, you know, throw some ideas in a bucket or whatever. Check with them first before you make them sit through what feels like now a really awkward meeting.
So I'm just going to go and I feel like we have almost nailed this at RS21. So this was a big thing that our employee well-being group brought up at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of us are at work because we love the people we work with, and we're missing out on like probably one of the most important benefits of the job in not having that social connection. The employee well-being group was also incredibly aware of the fact that everyone has different social preferences and finds different things fun. And so we actually kind of have 4 ways that we have been encouraging social kind of connections that meet different communication styles and create different levels of connection across the organization. And so the first one is something that I do as a person who leads a lot of meetings. I will often show up intentionally 5 minutes late to the meeting to allow my team to screw around while I am not there and have a conversation about their dog or their kid or how much they, you know, hate the client or whatever, you know, they want to talk about. And giving that 5 minutes, some people have like, they just know, they're like, all right, Jess isn't going to be there. I'm going to get there early and I'm just going to like socialize. I'll come in and be like, cool. All right, guys, we have an agenda. Let's get going. And they know I'm going to drive it once I get there, but they also know I'm going to give them that time to have me not in the room and have that conversation without me. So that's more of like a project level or like working group level. The other thing that we have been doing at RS21, and this is a kind of a cool example of, like I was saying earlier, the EWB said, hey, we want a pony, no, you can't have a pony. Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, the employee well-being group said, we need to have coffee breaks where we can get paired with another person at the company and spend a half hour of admin time just hanging out and chatting. And our C-suite was like, oh, hell no. Like we're a billable services company. There's no way you're going to get coffee breaks. Like, are you out of your mind? You guys can do that on your own time. Company started doing better financially. Employee well-being group, persistence and patience, came back and said, hey, can we have assigned coffee breaks? There's this really cool integration thing called Donut on Slack where people get randomly matched with people and then they can have a half hour of admin time to meet. And that has really, really, finally C-suite was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. The time is right. and let's do it. And so donut integration on Slack is awesome. Highly recommend that. And people can opt in and out of that. I did it for a while and I was like, I'm good. I don't need to meet more people. I opted out. I'm more of an introvert. And that wasn't a valuable experience for me to just connect with somebody. But new people at the company, they love it. And people, you know, especially now that we're growing so rapidly as a distributed workforce, those kinds of social connections are important. Number 3, we have started doing design team creativity challenges, and we do one a quarter, and whoever wants it picks it up. And so today we did our first one. Everyone lost their minds. It was really simple. It was bring in an object that's well designed, do a show and tell, talk about why it's well designed and how you might apply that to your design work. I mean, that is design school 101. But we've never done that together as a group. And that was a focused, intellectually stimulating, work-related connection point that was not project related. And so I, as the director, said, this is how we're going to spend an hour of our time together. Awesome. Awesome. And people started to learn more about each other's life. And the last thing we do is more company-wide. We do social hours. And I'd say it's probably more like quarterly, but we have like a wild topic. And then we get up online and it's one person at a time. And so the last one we did was people submitted like crazy facts about themselves, just one, and then we would read them. And it was kind of like a guess who game. And we had a guess who said the crazy thing. And of course it's voluntary, right? So you don't have to participate in this. It's at 5 o'clock. But we learned so many crazy things. Like one of my data engineers had auditioned for and turned down a starring role on Barney when he was 8. And I was like, I would have never learned that. And it was really fun. And it's a good way for people who are introverted to know that they have one thing that they have to say, engage, and then just listen. And so other people who want to crosstalk can get more social. So those are the 4 things that we have done very successfully. And I think people are kind of pumped on it. Hopefully one of those might work for you.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, those are fun.
Awesome.
I love that 3rd one. It's great. Well, and that actually brings us right past our time. I don't know if everyone needs to, well, we're all slightly different time zones, but
Yeah.
call it a night. How we doing?
I posted my slides there. Feel free
great.
to share the recording with anyone. If you've got questions, my email is super simple. It's jess@rs21.io, jess@rs21.io. You can send me messages on LinkedIn, but like I'm pretty bad about that, as Crystal and Noel can attest to. I'll get back to you in a week or 7.
Yeah, this was great, Jess. This was really helpful and beautiful.
Thank you.
It's nice to see how you're choosing to use your power.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It's good to see you all and meet some of you who
Yeah.
are this.
Christian, and we have a good group here.
Yeah,
Adam,
yeah, thanks,
and
everyone.
everybody.
It's a good size.
Fantastic.
Mr. Mike.
Well, I'm glad we all had a chance to talk too. That was super fun.
All right. Yeah,
Thank you
you.
very much.
Wonderful talk. Yeah,
Thank
Thank
it
you,
was-
guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Have a
night.
wonderful evening. Bye,
All
you
right.
guys.
Bye.
Everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye, Crystal.
Bye.
Get Noel on here for 1 second.
Okay, Noel, you
This
Mike.
worked out well that everyone hung up just before the 2 of us did, so I can chat with you for half a second. Where were you? You missed the world's greatest talk.
Oh, I had to work.
How dare you?
Work.
I'm teasing.
I had to
teasing.
work.
Poor thing.
No, I had to
I don't know.
work. I was
But
cool.
yeah, but
How's
that's it. I just wanted to thank you guys. I mean, I really felt like I didn't have to do anything. She just took over. She was just like, I don't need you. Get out of my way.
We all
Feels
need
good.
you, Mike.
No.
But anyways, we'll have to chat more and
Yeah.
figure out what our next event is.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I'll send you a short list of things. I am in the process of putting together sort of a every other month schedule for We'll Talk
Okay.
UX.
Cool.
So,
All right.
I
We'll
think
get
the
that
first one
going.
might be as early as a couple weeks from now, and then we'll go every other month from there. But just so you have a sense of what I'm thinking.
Okay. Perfect. So we'll get it started.
Fantastic.
Thanks. Have a
Great,
good night.
thanks. Bye,
Bye.
Crystal. All right, see you guys. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.